This way we can keep the ball rolling and not take your entire Saturday away. Is that good with everyone? Is that not good with anyone? Miss Naima, strawberries, hazelnut, sugar-free creamer. Miss Naima is hard to please sometimes. So Ms. Miller, if you could come up for us, where's Ms. Miller? Here she is. She's gonna give you all a quick announcement, let you know about some funding so you all can apply for that.
Cool.
All right, so first of all, don't shoot the messenger because I'm not a representative of Gold Leaf, but we did apply for the Hurricane Relief Fund. I'm with the Association of Mexicans of North Carolina, and we were a recipient of that funding, so I'm letting you know a little bit of details about that because there was a little bit of confusion on that funding. They set aside a big chunk of funding to give out to nonprofits all across North Carolina to deal with specifically the damages done by Hurricane Florence. But when they released it, there wasn't as much information out to the organizations, but they provided a little bit to us after we were selected as finalists and then got the acceptance for that. So the list of the different recipients is on their website, and it tells you about the different things that they can do, because the money that they can give out is based off what they asked for, and it's all different asks because we weren't specified exactly what we're supposed to ask for. So some of us are doing repairs, like we're specifically asked for money to help people rebuild their homes. Some folks ask for like rental stuff, rental amounts and utilities. The only thing with that is it depends on when the bill was issued. So if you still have folks that are having issues paying their utilities, that money's there for that, depending on which organization is supporting that. Some of them are restricted by county, depending on what they applied for. The biggest thing is that they put to us is that we have to make sure that when we do our intake, is that we're covering things that aren't covered by other people. So if you got denied by FEMA, most likely you are qualified to apply to these organizations for that funding. Or if you got denied for or if you didn't qualify at all, you probably have to bring that paperwork in to prove that, because their reporting system was really in depth, and that's why it might be a little bit complicated to apply to the different organizations that receive that funding, just because they're very specific on who can apply and who couldn't, and how you have to report that. So just be aware that you're going to have to bring a little bit of paperwork to apply. That's pretty much it. It's just because all nonprofits, and there's a list on their website.
How they get in touch with you?
You can get in touch with me. We're the Association of Mexicans of North Carolina, got approved to cover folks that live in mostly Lenore, Craven, Beaufort, Edgecombe, and Nash. So if you're living in the area, you can contact me. She's also here. You have a question? Okay. So I have business cards, and also my email is Samantha M as in Mary at amexcanc.org. Samantha M is SAMANTHA, M as in Mary at AMEXCANNC. There's two N's in there. .org. And then we're also on Facebook, so you can look us up on Facebook and get in contact with us if you lose our contact information. Everything we do is on Facebook.
Chief, what's going to happen?
You're gonna leave some cards on the table, right? On the table here. Yes, so in case you all forgot, there's tabling now, where we just left from eating. All the resources. Jody, you said that? No. Okay, all the resources, people here with information, they will have their information on the tables in Riverview Terrace, where we just left from eating. And
How long will they be here?
they will be here until the end of the session, end of the program, end of the summit. So we will have time between, we have a break between each session, and there's a 15-minute networking break in between. So you all have time to run down there, grab some cards, ask more questions, to get follow-up information.
Only if they know how to come straight back.
Only if you know how to come straight back. and Samantha has forgotten something.
So there's a lot of information for that. It's only funding for the next 6 months, so definitely get on that. They started issuing it in January, so folks will finish their paperwork, already have it, and it's really the only 6 months we can give out this money. So contact the organizations in your area really quickly. That's it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, real quick, Brother John, where are you? Let's give us some quick information so we can get our focus going. Thank you.
Yeah, just want to point out to people, there's a lot going on in the country now, and the government shutdown and all those kinds of things. But there's also something else that's happening, and that's the U.S. government is about to interfere in the lives of the government of Venezuela, right? And what they're doing is supporting an opposition that was not democratically elected. And saying that they're the ones that are in charge. It would just be like if Nancy Pelosi now said, I'm the president. Okay, that's what they're doing. The U.S. does that all over the globe, right? We've been talking about Russians and interfering with U.S. elections, but now we've got the U.S. interfering in Venezuela. So we're saying that Trump should keep his hands off of Venezuela. Let the Venezuelan people decide how they want their government to run. Whether we agree with their government or not, it's democratically elected, and the U.S. shouldn't interfere like they've interfered in Haiti and in Zimbabwe and in South Africa, and you just name all the places, Nicaragua. The U.S. government is always there. So I've got some posters, if you want to take them back with you, if you want to take a little picture with it, and we can circulate it on Facebook, on the internet. But just want you to be mindful of that while we deal with our problems here at home, that the U.S. shouldn't be interfering in the affairs of other people, and our resources should not go into the military, right? Those resources should be used here in this country to help us with flood recovery and other things. So thank you.
Okay, that was powerful words right there. Ms. Marble, can you come over and give us some information on our focus group? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Arbor Quist. I'm a PhD student at UNC in environmental epidemiology, and I'll be leading 2 focus groups today. These are small groups of like 6 to 12 people with a focus on hurricane survivors, your concerns related to the environment and health. And so this is for research purposes and to make sure that research addresses survivors' concerns, but it's an opportunity also to have an intimate conversation about some of your health and environmental concerns, and to learn from each other, and to hear how different communities might be addressing or some of the concerns, or having some sort of action. And so we're going to do a focus group now. If there are 6 to 12 people, that would be great. I know there's also really great panels here, but if there are people especially interested in health and environmental concerns, we'd love to have a chat. It'll just be a discussion. We'll all just be talking. So there would be one now, and then there would be another one at 5. If there's interest, come join or sign up on the list. But one would be now. Interest. Thanks.
Okay. Excuse me, everybody. I just can y'all hear me okay? I don't really need this, do I? Okay, so I just want to kind of explain what Arbor was just talking about and how this came about. My name is Naima Muhammad, and I am co-director, community organizer with the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network. And we are a statewide organization that addresses environmental issues, environmental degradation in North Carolina, but with a main focus on Eastern North Carolina, because what we have found over the years is Eastern North Carolina is like dumping ground for the state of North Carolina. Anything white people that don't want in their backyards, you can find it in Eastern North Carolina. So when the floods came, I know y'all might have heard about the animal waste that got spilled into the waters. Then we had coal ash pits that ran over. We already had the Gen X problem down here in Wilmington that's poisoning people's water, so more of that was dumped. We had 2 waste treatment plants to dump 600,000 gallons of human waste into the water. So you have all these things mixed together that was in these flood waters, which, as y'all know, water don't stand still. So the contaminants that was there could be anywhere right there in the environment. And while the water has dried up, we can't see the contamination. You probably didn't really see it when the water was there if you didn't know about it. But the soil is still there where the water's dried into. So every time it rains, these contaminants gonna get stirred up again. When children go out to play and they dig around in dirt, they gonna be stirring up whatever's laying in the soil. And so to try and help people stay in front of any health concerns that may come up because of this exposure, we were looking at doing this environmental impact study where we'll track helping people to monitor their health as we move forward, so you can be in front of the 8 ball instead of behind it. If something starts to change in your health, you should know sooner rather than later. And so we're hoping that with this piece that we're going to introduce to you, that we'll be able to help that happen. And the people from UNC has agreed to work along with the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network to help make this happen. So we need your participation. But I just wanted you to kind of understand why we need your participation. And then if you get in the focus groups, they will be able to answer any other questions that you may have. But we shouldn't take lightly what you heard about what was in the waters, because we've been dealing with these environmental issues in Eastern North Carolina for nearly 3 decades, and we have documented proof that this stuff makes people sick. And so with all that stuff running together, please don't take it lightly, and try to get in front instead of being behind. Thank you.
And participate in the focus group. All right, so before we start our panel, if you want to participate in this round of the focus group, it is in room B, which is right here. And if you want to take a shortcut, you can come this way now before we close the door. Once we start the panel, we're going to close this door and you're going to have to go outside into room B. So there's going to be one now, another at 5 o'clock. Thank you. So now, close the door, outside, and then 5 o'clock. Now I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Sue Perry. She's going to introduce herself and her panelists, and we're going to get a lot of questions answered.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Perry Cole. I'm a resident of Edgecombe County. For those of you who don't know, Edgecombe was one of the hardest hit communities under Floyd and under Matthew, and we're still recovering from Matthew. I'm also a member of the executive committee of the NAACP State Conference of Branches. I'm chair of housing issues, and I am with the North Carolina Association of Community Development Corporations, and I'm serving on the planning committee for today's event. So I welcome you to the Housing Displacement Workshop. Now, I want to say up front, be candid with y'all, that we don't have all the answers on this panel. There's still a lot of unknowns and gray areas, but we do have some information. Now, you heard this morning about disaster literacy. You heard that term, right? And the need to educate yourself in your community. You probably also remember that there was reference to the challenges of navigating hurricane recovery and isolation. You also heard that you need to know what your legal leverage points are. Did you remember some of the speakers mentioning these things this morning? And that's why we're having this legal aid workshop this afternoon. What we're trying to do is build bridges to a key disaster recovery partner, and that is Legal Aid of North Carolina. Legal Aid of North Carolina has had experience in multiple disaster recovery situations. It has trained professional attorneys who specialize in disaster recovery, and they can represent eligible clients. It is very, very, very important that when you get a denial under any of the programs that we've talked about today, that you understand you have a right to challenge that denial. And everybody should start with the assumption that every decision that is adverse to your interest should be challenged. So it's very important today that you get the information from Legal Aid of North Carolina and you get connected both as an individual and on behalf of your community. Now there's a booklet that we have here at the front of the room, and we have plenty of copies. And there is a contact phone number on the back of the booklet that tells you how to contact Legal Aid of North Carolina. You need to take this booklet back to your community and spread this information about, this is free of charge if you are eligible. And if you're not eligible, they may be able to refer you to a cooperating private attorney. So this is really important that we realize that this is a resource available to us. And frankly, not enough people are taking advantage of that resource. And that's why we're here today. You're going to hear a presentation from attorneys with the Wilmington office of Legal Aid of North Carolina. But Legal Aid is a statewide organization, and it covers all of the counties, or most of the counties in North Carolina. So if you're not covered by the Wilmington office, there'll be another Legal Aid office that you can get to through that number on that booklet. Now, what's going to happen today? The presentation is going to cover a variety of topics that have been experienced by attorneys handling housing cases and other kinds of cases in post-recovery from storms. You may not be interested in every topic, but there may be somebody in your community that you can share certain information with. I want you to listen to the whole presentation, and then you're going to have a chance for question and answers, about a 10 or 15 minute period of time at the end of the session. Let me say up front that attorneys are different from other people. They are covered by certain rules and regulations by the Bar Association, and there is a confidentiality requirement that they must follow, which means that they cannot, in this open setting, comment on an individual, give you advice on an individual fact pattern. So please don't present any individual facts about your situation. Kind of talk generically, but you will be able to access their services if you are eligible through that 800 number. And the only reason I'm saying this is the requirement of the Bar Association, and they are bound by that requirement. Are you with me?
Yes.
All right, so without further ado, and you have some very experienced attorneys sitting in the room with you, I want to introduce my friend and colleague, Richard Klein from the Wilmington office of Legal Aid of North Carolina.
So I'm going to try speaking without the microphone. If you can't hear me, raise your hand. Can hear me. All right. So again, my name is Richard Klein. I've been a managing attorney for the Wilmington office for about 20 years. We were involved in the Hurricane Florence recovery efforts. It was different back then. The money was largely state money as opposed to federal money, and the state had a lot of discretion about how they would use it, and that worked to the benefit of our clients. Today, we're going to discuss about 6 different topics. We're mindful of the need to ask questions. We're probably going to give you more time than 15 minutes. And just remember that we don't have all the answers. We're going to talk a little bit about FEMA appeals, some questions about title to property, the application process, a little bit about landlord-tenant, some home mortgage foreclosure questions, and some consumer protection questions. Again, as Sue's mentioned, please don't give us any personal information in your initial question. The number to call in the back of that book is 866-219-5262. There are several numbers. That's the Legal Aid helpline, 866-219-5262. I would encourage anyone with a legal issue to call Monday. I'm really concerned that people are missing deadlines, and And once you miss deadlines, then it's discretionary as to whether you'll get a further review of your case. So again, if anyone here has an issue with FEMA, an issue with insurance, please give us a call. And as Deborah mentioned earlier, it's really important to stay part of the process. FEMA applications are being used for other purposes as well. We're involved in a Hurricane Matthew recovery effort, and we're helping people there. And some of the same issues that have come up in Matthew, I'm going to mention here today. So again, try to realize that it's been very frustrating, but I'm encouraging you to please call us on Monday. We'll try to steer you through the process. And we'll give you legal advice. The process basically is you call, you provide financial information so our attorneys can determine your eligibility. And if you're eligible, you get legal advice at the same phone call. So it's not a drawn-out process and enables us to get on top of the issue fairly quickly. So let me start with talking about FEMA appeals. Most of you know that the FEMA appeal period is narrow, 60 days from when you get the denial notice, and they go by postmark. So some of you may be past the appeal period, but you still have a meritorious case. And we believe we can help on those. There's provision for reconsideration of matters that occurred after the appeal period, as well as denials of appeals. And basically, if you have new information, your attorney can advise you on how to present that, perhaps get a reconsideration. The information we're getting, and admittedly subjective, is that the people who do appeal get a little better treatment. Regrettably, the initial numbers on appeals were quite low, so as many as 12,000 denials in Hanover County and only 100 appeals. So again, the message here is if you've been denied, you feel you're correct, appeal. And it's not a complicated process, but you do want to get complete information out in that appeal. Your statement of the appeal needs to be under oath. And the process basically is you add a statement at the end of your appeal that I declare under penalty of perjury that the information foregoing is true and correct. That's sufficient. It doesn't have to be notarized, but you do need to say it. Many of our clients were being denied FEMA benefits because they either were not in possession of the home at the time of the hurricane, or they did not have proper title to the home. FEMA has been better on the title issue. So if you're an heir in possession of property, you don't have a deed, but you've been acting as the owner, you've been paying perhaps tax bills, insurance bills, all that documentation can be used to get you home repair benefits under FEMA, even though you're not the title owner of the property. That is not well publicized, but that is the position. There was a lot of pushback after the Puerto Rican experience where very few people had clear title, and FEMA bent and changed the rules a bit. So we have some flexibility with FEMA benefits if you're the owner in possession, even if you don't have clear title to the property. If you're appealing a FEMA denial on home repairs, you should try to get your own contractor to prepare a proposal indicating what the repairs are necessary. Don't just appeal a denial, but provide additional information from FEMA to rule in your favor. Similarly, if you're appealing a denial of monetary benefits for unrelated home repair issues, you do need to have receipts and provide copies of those receipts in your appeal. If you were denied FEMA benefits because your house was damaged during Hurricane Matthew and you were not living in the home at the time of Florence, give us a call. That's a gray area right now. FEMA's taken a position that if you're not in possession at the time of the storm, you're not eligible. But, of course, people who had Hurricane Matthew claims who are still in a Hurricane Matthew recovery stage may be treated differently. We don't know the answer. But again, contacting us if you have that scenario where your home was damaged by Matthew, you cannot live in it, and then it was damaged a second time by Florence. So an issue that's developed now with FEMA and flood insurance benefits is a situation where someone gets FEMA or flood insurance benefits, then spends the money not on home repairs, but on other essential items. And then they apply or be found eligible for further federal money. There's a duplication of benefits documents developing. And if you had benefits that you did not spend correctly on what they were designed to be spent on, you can't get a second amount of federal benefits for the same item. So it's really important, and I know it's difficult, when you get a grant from FEMA to spend the money as FEMA has designated, If you get benefits under flood insurance, same procedure. You got to spend the money on what the benefits were allowed for and take photographs to show you spent it correctly. Right now, we're in a process of Hurricane Matthew, and we're trying to get people benefits, but the state's taking a position that if you receive benefits under FEMA and you applied on Hurricane Matthew for the same type of repair, they're not going to pay benefits unless you refund the money. So again, real serious. We're still in the middle ground there. We're not quite sure how that's going to be resolved. But the important lesson here is if you get FEMA benefits or flood insurance benefits for home repair, you need to spend the money on what they designated needed to be repaired, not for something else. Now, the clear title issue is another matter that presents in a variety of ways. Many of our clients in Eastern North Carolina live on homes that they inherited from family members. And many times, because of the lack of access to attorneys for African Americans in the early part of this century and previous years, people don't have a chain of title where you have a clear deed to the property. FEMA, again, has taken a better position on this than other agencies. We mention it just to encourage you that if you're living with someone who's an heir and they have title and they're still alive, please encourage them to consider a will where they name someone that they want to acquire the property and not die without a will, presenting problems for the heirs. Again, this is a major problem in Eastern North Carolina. Most of the situations, it went back multiple generations. And sometimes it's possible, if there weren't too many heirs, to begin a legal proceeding to acquire a clear title to the present owner, but it's expensive and complicated. So again, the better part is the estate planning. If you're living with someone who is the owner, they need to be encouraged in a thoughtful, pleasant way that they need to consider a will where they name who they wish to have be the heir of the property when they pass. But just one caveat, it's really important that you not encourage older family members to simply convey the property to a child or a loved one without getting fair consideration for that conveyance. So they do so, they may become ineligible for Medicaid, which is the only source of health insurance for people who are looking at nursing home care. Say again?
Can you repeat what you just said?
So Medicaid has a look-back provision. And Medicaid takes the position that if you transferred any property for less than fair market value 5 years prior to your application for Medicaid, you may be ineligible for Medicaid for a period of time. So again, we see a number of situations where the parents being encouraged by the child to simply convey the house to the child to avoid anyone taking the house at a later date. The danger in doing so is you become ineligible for Medicaid for a period of up to 5 years. So again, we want clear title, but we're encouraging you to do it correctly and do it by deed and do it by will and not simply have someone convey it to property without getting fair market value to the child, which makes the parent ineligible for Medicaid. And that unfortunately occurs quite a bit. And we have people contacting us all the time for us just to draft a deed. And then when we ask a few questions, we discover that what's happening here is the child's encouraging the parent to transfer the title to avoid any kind of lien on the property, but the consequence is that the parent becomes ineligible for Medicaid. And there's no other source of money for nursing home care other than Medicaid. So that's why it's an important question for older citizens. Last, I just want to comment briefly on selection of a contractor. In Matthew, fortunately, the state's taken a proactive position, and as to people that get Matthew money, some 2 years down the road, the state will supervise the reconstruction efforts and choose the contractors and take responsibility. Otherwise, it's very difficult for the average citizen to select a contractor. And I don't have any magic words here, but there are a couple of things you need to look out for. Do not give anyone money in advance. Now, I say this, but I have friends and relatives who do it anyway. But many contractors are very skilled at presenting themselves in a very effective, conversational way. They develop trust. You give them the money, and then they don't come back. Or they come back and do a bad job, and then you discover they don't have sufficient assets to pay off a court judgment, so you're left without a remedy. Your only leverage is not to pay the money until the work is completed, and make sure the work is done properly before you pay the bill. you need to ask, is the contractor a licensed general contractor? If they're licensed, they have to post a bond to the state. It gives you some minimal leverage against the contractor if they don't do what they're required to do. But again, you need to make sure it's a licensed general contractor. But again, the caveat here is the contract doesn't protect you. You can contract with anyone. You need to contract just to specify the repairs, what's to be done, the date, and the amount. But don't believe that because you have a contract, you have a solid legal remedy. You need to research the contractor a little bit before you interact with them and make sure they have a good reputation, they do the work, and they have the staff. And I generally recommend they have an office, a fiscal office in your county before you do business with them. Next up, Roger Cook is going to comment on landlord-tenant issues. Then Bob Anderson's going to comment on mortgage foreclosure and loan modifications. We'd like to try to finish the presentation and then have people ask questions later rather than digress now, if that would be okay.
If I could just add one thing to Roger's presentation. A lot of people don't know that in North Carolina, you can do what's called a holographic will. Holographic is a fancy word for saying it has to be all in your handwriting. No part of the will can be typed. It does not have the same formalities, and so you do it entirely in your handwriting, express what your intentions are for the car, for the server, whatever you're going to give to your kids, and then put that will in where you keep your important papers. So that's admissible in North Carolina. My preference would be to advise you to have a lawyer do it for you, but a lot of people are not in a position financially to do that.
Hi, can you all hear me okay? I don't really like to sit. I sit all day. I'm going to stand up. Okay? Thank you all for being here. I'm glad you're here. I can talk to you until midnight tonight about landlord-tenant law, but only some portion of that, right, would necessarily apply to what you need to know. So what I want to find out in the next minute is what's on your mind so that in my 10 minutes, I can give you something you can walk out of here that will be helpful to you, okay? So rather than just shout out questions, let me throw out some topics and maybe see some shows of hands about whether that's relevant information for you or for someone that you're connected to. So one issue would be repairs that are needed to a rental dwelling. How many people are involved with that issue, okay? Okay. Another issue would be whether rent has been or is being demanded when the place you were renting hasn't fully been fixed. Is anybody dealing with that issue or has been? Okay, a little bit, okay, okay. The process of eviction in North Carolina is a specific court kind of process, okay, and it's got rules, it's very structured. Anybody got concerns or questions about what happens with an eviction? How does it happen? What are my rights? Okay, I see a hand about that. Anybody waiting to get back into a rental dwelling that has not been repaired? Okay, and if you have a Section 8 voucher or in public or some other type of subsidized housing, you have special rights. Does anybody have any questions about that kind of housing in particular? Okay. All right, now shout out a couple questions to me right now. Just shout them to me. Just shout them to me. Yes, quickly.
I want to know who determines rent rates, like.
Okay.
Like who do you demand
Okay.
more affordable housing for your area?
Okay. Quick. Any other questions? Yes.
If you choose to turn your rental property into a rental property that's being refinished or fixed up from the hurricane, are there stipulations in it?
Okay. Quickly, any, yes.
Is there any legal protections for folks who don't have like a written contract, but they're living in an area that owns the area because they're
Okay. Okay. So the rights if your property's damaged and you're the tenant, basically. Okay. Yes.
If the owner has to move into an apartment that subsidized or get
and then they have to say move somewhere else from another foot. Do they have to still pay on their unit while they're in hotel or stay with someone while it's being repaired?
Okay, when you said an owner, do you mean an occupant, a tenant, a renter? Got it. Yes.
This may be piggybacking off the original question, but let's say someone living in public housing that is being destroyed because of the hurricane.
Yes.
What are their rights in terms of finding another alternative housing or getting some form of compensation?
Great question. Okay. I got food on my plate now. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to back it up, okay? And then I'm going to get closer into some of these specifics of these questions. Basic rule is landlord is responsible for maintaining a rental dwelling in fit and habitable condition, okay? Everything's got to work. It's got to meet the local housing code. That's the owner's responsibility, all right? And if something was wrong before the tenant moved in, the owner is supposed to have known about it. If you're the resident, the tenant, and you move in and you find out something's wrong, you need to notify the owner as soon as possible. And it's best to do it in writing and keep a copy. You are protected under North Carolina law from being evicted simply by complaining. If an owner tries to terminate your tenancy, we're going to talk about how they do that in a minute, because you complained, that's called retaliation. It's called a retaliatory eviction. And when they go through that court hearing, you can say, they're only doing this because I said you've got to fix that front door and fix the roof that's leaking. That's why you're evicting me. If you prove that, that eviction it will not be granted. A lease is a contract, although you don't have to have a written lease, but as long as the provisions of the lease meet the requirements of North Carolina landlord-tenant law, it's an enforceable contract. So this amount of rent we pay, the lease will last for this period of time, these people may live there, so forth and so on. If it says, I, the owner, don't have to fix anything, okay, it says that, you can both sign it, but that's against North Carolina law. That is not enforceable, okay? That's not enforceable. Now, something like these hurricanes, boy, I'm here from the Triangle in the last few years. We don't get this kind of thing where I'm from.
Yes.
Okay. And I feel very blessed to be in this area and very, very blessed to work with the wonderful colleagues I have. And I wouldn't change a thing, but my heart goes out to everyone who was affected by this, and that was probably everyone in this room. But you can't necessarily hold the landlord responsible. If your home is destroyed, you can't say, well, you've got to find me a new home. The owner didn't do anything to destroy your rental, basically. Now, an exception would be if you are in a subsidized program like public housing, speaking to the person who asked that question, there is a right to transfer to another subsidized unit where one is available, and a right to priority waiting lists and so forth. So if you're in a subsidized program, you have some special protections. But what if it's in the gray area where some repairs are needed, you can't really stay there in its condition? And those issues were very prominent in the few months after the storm. They may have all gotten worked out one way or another by this point. There is a provision in the law for a tenant to give notice that they want to terminate the tenancy because they don't want to stay there. But you basically have to do that within 10 days of when the loss happens. So we're way past that. I think there's overall a duty of reasonableness and a duty on the part of the landlord and the tenant to try to abide by the lease contract. The owner is responsible for repairs. They have a reasonable period of time to make them. When you agree to pay rent, you're paying rent for a dwelling that is fully good. Everything works. It meets the code. What happens if everything doesn't work? What happens if the owner says, hey, I can't fix it. I don't have anybody to fix it. It's going to be 2 more months. Here is my advice. First of all, here in North Carolina, you can't just hold back your rent and say, okay, fine. I mean, you can, but then boom, they can file for the court eviction for non-payment of rent. And you can bring up at court, well, this didn't work, that didn't work, it's not worth $850, it's only worth maybe $450. But then you're gonna have to tell that to the judge, convince that to the judge. So you're gonna make yourself vulnerable. It may end up in that posture, but before it does, my suggestion would be you say to the owner, look, I'm not getting $850 worth of rental unit here. It's gonna take you 2 months to fix it, okay. It's worth $450, I'm gonna give you $450, but I'm not gonna give you $850. Let's be reasonable here. And I think that's a great approach. And that's the argument you'll make to the judge if the owner says, if you end up in an eviction situation, which hopefully you don't. What else? Yes.
So I don't really know how this goes together. I'm just gonna try to explain thinking.
Okay. And I can't give specific legal advice as we've.
No, it's not specific.
Yeah, but I'll try to say something.
If a city, county is, I'm guessing, getting HUD funding to provide low-income housing, and because of neglect, almost every bit of low-income housing in the city is wiped out. Is there a way to, how is best the way to strategically hold them accountable and enforce the thing that they have been given funding for and should have been provided for, and because of negligence, now the thing is not existent?
That's an hour-long discussion that you need to have with somebody, probably not me. And that's a great question, and I want you to have that discussion, but I can't have that with you now, okay? There's Benjamin Williams is here from the North Carolina Justice Center, or was, and that's one idea I have of a resource for you to talk with that question about, okay? Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to try to restate my question.
Sure.
So if you have a home that's being repaid,
Okay.
and you're not in the home at this point.
You're the owner of the home.
Yes.
Yes.
And you would like to perhaps turn it into a rental property.
Okay.
As opposed to returning to that home, but it's in a, I guess, a disaster flood zone area. Are there any stipulations around how much flood insurance policies, anything, or the reason why you have to go back into that home because you have now used government monies to get fixed as the primary problem?
That's an interesting question. Let me pass this off to Mr. Kleiner.
That's probably a discussion you want to have with a real estate attorney who's familiar with government benefits. Some of the benefits that are awarded are tied to maintaining occupancy of the home by the primary owner. So it gets tricky when you're converting usage. Some of the benefits that are awarded after FEMA, but community development block grant funds, are conditioned upon continued occupancy by the owner of record. And converting a property to rental may violate those rules. But again, I think you want to have that discussion with a private attorney who does real estate law, who's familiar with the different programs, really beyond the scope of what we can do today.
Thank you, Richard. I'm out of time, and probably I'm out of time, but feel free to bring up questions during our Q&A period, okay? It's good talking to you. Thank you for listening.
Good afternoon, and thanks for allowing us to join in this event today. I grew up in California, where the natural disasters there are earthquakes and wildfires. So when I came to my senses and moved here, I, not long after getting here, about 10 years ago, got my first baptism into natural disasters here in the form of a tropical storm. But whatever the source of the natural disaster, there's a one-word description, and I would call that disruption. So you've got disruption in your living arrangements. You've got disruption as far as your job or your business. But one of the big problems, what I'm going to talk about today, is financial disruption. And so I'm going to be focusing on folks that are homeowners that are paying a mortgage, and I'll talk about a few other items as well. So when you have an interruption in income, or there's other factors that don't allow you to make your mortgage payment, the eventual outcome of that, if you're not able to resolve it, is going to be a foreclosure. Now, one of the misconceptions that people have about foreclosures is that the bank owns my house and they can come and change the locks and kick me out on a moment's notice. Well, that's not true. You own the house, but it is subject to the mortgage that you took out with the bank to buy the house in most cases. So the foreclosure is a process that starts with a warning letter basically saying, you got to get this taken care of or we're going to start foreclosure. And then the foreclosure process itself can take up to 60 days. So there's some range of time. But one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do is not wait until you get the foreclosure letter. Don't wait until you get the foreclosure notice. You need to get ahead of things and be proactive. You need to reach out to your lender. Now, there are ways that you can derail the process of you possibly losing your house. And one of those is what's called a loan modification. So a loan modification, as the name would imply, is that the bank is going to look at your financial situation and figure out if by a combination of lowering your interest rate and extending the life of the loan, whether or not they can save you some money. The loan modification process begins with a hardship letter. It does not need to be a special fancy flowery thing, but I always encourage my people to say, I am serious about saving my house. This is the only house my kids have known. Things like that, play a little violin music in the background. And so that's very, very important. And when you have started that process, you need to be, as I said, proactive. You also need to be persistent. If your point of contact at the bank says, I'll call you back next Thursday, call them back on Wednesday. Just keep at it. Let them know that you're going to be the squeaky wheel. There's also an appeal process if your loan modification is denied. I don't want to go into that because that's probably an hour-long discussion. Finally, if loan modification ends up not being a viable option for you, and you are facing the loss of your home through foreclosure, there is a tool in the toolbox called a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Now, Chapter 13 bankruptcy is a payment plan bankruptcy. It's not a liquidating bankruptcy. They're not going to come in and take your car and all that other stuff. What they're doing is they're giving you the right to enter into a court-supervised payment plan that will last as short as 36 months and as long as 60 months. So in the case of a mortgage, you can agree through your bankruptcy plan to catch that mortgage up over 60 months. So whatever you're behind, divide that by 60, add your mortgage payment to that because you're going to resume making your mortgage payment. And that's what your bankruptcy time plan is going to do for you. Bankruptcy is not the end of the world. A lot of people think that, oh, my credit's going to be in the toilet forever. It's not. That's just not true. Yes, it'll be on your credit report, but it is not going to preclude you from being able to get credit in the future. I've had clients actually while in their Chapter 13s buying cars and buying houses, so it's something that is possible. Last thing I want to talk about are scams, and so when you get a traffic ticket, what happens? You get letters, don't you, in the mail from lawyers, people you've never even heard of. Well, when a foreclosure happens, you have people that will go down to the clerk's office and harvest the names and addresses of the individuals that are in foreclosure and then send out the same kinds of letters. However, there are also what I call the bottom feeders, the predators. When a person is facing loss of their house, they're very vulnerable. And these people know that. And so if they call up saying that we can do this, we can do that, the chances are they probably can't. We can modify your loan for you. That just paid $2,000, $3,000 up front. It's not going to work. So stay away from those things. You see the roadside signs, credit repair, foreclosure, we can help, don't do it, because these people are very crafty, I should say, about trying to separate you from your money. Thank you.
Okay, now this is your turn to talk. What's on your mind? Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's about bankruptcy.
Yeah, you said something about bankruptcy, child, chapter 13 and everything. Now, how long that bankruptcy lasts on credit? It shows on credit.
Chapter 13 will be 7 years.
7 years.
And chapter 13 will be 7 years, and chapter 7 is 10 years.
Chapter 7?
Yeah, that's different. That's a different type of bankruptcy.
Okay. And you said people still buy cars. I just wanted to know because you said people still buy houses or cars, anything with it. How does that work?
Well, you have to. All right. When you're in a chapter 13, your finances are kind of under the sort of general supervision of a person called a chapter 13 trustee. Now, if you're in a bankruptcy for 5 years, the chances are you're going to have to buy a car. And so what we have to do is go through the process of getting your bankruptcy trustee's approval of that loan. So what I had my clients do is I have them go out and shop for the loan and the car, and they send me the terms of the loan, the amount borrowed, the monthly payment, the interest rate. I then file a pleading or a motion with the bankruptcy court, send it to the trustee. And the trustees have some basic guidelines, so they're not going to let your body escalate and have a $750 month payment. But if you have a reasonable monthly payment, the trustee recognizes that people need their cars for their work and their livelihood. So that's how that works.
Who else?
They're coming around the mic. I just wanted to comment on the foreclosure part. There are housing counseling agencies. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there are agencies that are in the business of helping you. The Housing Finance Agency has funds to assist with foreclosure. There is a qualification process, don't ask me. I know just enough to be dangerous. But I do know that's there, and so you have to seek them out and find out if you qualify or if you, but a housing council, and you can go to HUD's website, hud.gov, and type in housing counseling agency. And that's also, you can call our office. We work with a lot of housing counseling agencies across the state. And my agency is North Carolina Housing Coalition. So I just wanted to let you all know that is a resource if you are facing foreclosure for any reason, to also tap into that as well. They're not legal counsel, they cannot provide legal advice, but they can inform you of the modification process and any state funding that is available or grants that are available to help you through the foreclosure.
Okay, I'm asking for a friend of a friend because it has nothing to do with me, so, yeah. Okay.
Right.
Y'all know this does not. Okay. So, okay, how do I word this? Okay. So if you're in FEMA housing under their contract and they go and evict you out, what's the rules on that? If they never put it in paper, it's not about me though. And they never put it in paper, you just got a phone call to be out a certain date. What's the rules on that? I work with Bradley, but he hasn't gotten nowhere with me yet. So it's not to do with me though.
Our relationship with you as a client, we really can't do this kind of.
What you say?
What's the laws on it though? What's the laws on it? Not right, but just what's the laws on?
We're advising people that are being told by FEMA to leave, that they're not required to.
Speak into the mic so we can all hear.
I apologize. So we're advising people that as to people who are occupants of FEMA trailers, that we believe they have protection under state law and they should consider not leaving if they have nowhere else to go. But they need to contact us to discuss the particulars of the situation. So again, this is a gray area. FEMA faced this issue with Katrina. They faced the issue with Floyd, and that's why they've limited the amount of housing they're providing on that basis. So again, the mode with FEMA right now is to pay for temporary hotel stays, but not to provide as many mobile homes as they did in prior storms. And that reflects their experience with the difficulty of asking people to leave when they have nowhere to go. So this is largely a political issue, not a legal issue. But if you're told you need to leave by FEMA, again, a response can be, I have nowhere to go, I need to speak with the supervisor and put it up the road. But again, this turns on the fact that we don't have a clear legal remedy. And if FEMA were to take a hard line, it's possible they could get an order requiring you to leave, because arguably you're not a tenant, you're in a different category. So it's an unclear area. We're frank to admit when we don't have clear answers. But again, if someone has nowhere to go, I think the better response is I need to talk to the supervisor, I have nowhere to go, and you work out a transition plan and maybe get some additional time. But there are no guarantees here, and we're not trying to tell people that they have rights that they don't have.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about class action suits. Sometimes I wonder where all of the water came from. Has somebody made a mistake somewhere? And if there's a list of class actions, where should I find that kind of thing so I can join in if I need to be there?
Could you repeat your question?
My family and I wondered where the water came from. Was it a mistake made by government somewhere? Is it a decision that someone made that affected our house? And I wondered if there's somewhere I need to be watching for that kind of thing. Class actions will come in the future. If there's a listing or a website, I should be watching to see if my family might be eligible for something somewhere down the line.
Okay, so class actions are simply a vehicle once you have a clear legal wrong and you have a remedy, and then you have a number of people that are affected by the same wrong. The difficulty is pointing out who is responsible for the water intrusion that you're mentioning. Obviously, it's different for a landlord who doesn't repair a roof. It's also different for a municipality who doesn't correct a sewer issue. So again, the real question is not class actions, but rather what's the issue, who caused the issue, is there liability?
So if the city's responsible because they didn't drain the sewage or they didn't clear the pipes, what is the remedy for the survivor in that case? Did you understand my question? Do I need a microphone?
Yeah, I understand your question. There's a broad area of governmental immunity, and your question touches upon that, and it ties into insurance issues. So it's really something I can't answer in a short meeting like this. But the issue is whether the government's immune for their actions,
Right.
and then immunity can be limited if they have insurance to cover that issue. And then oftentimes your recovery is limited to the amount of insurance. So it's a very complex area. That's something that attorneys who do this kind of work for a living could discuss with you, but it's not work that we.
So if I'm a survivor, where do I get that information from? Who would be?
Okay, so if there were a claim against the municipality for what they did wrong, you can either consult through the lawyer referral service and get a consult with a private attorney, or there may be in your community attorneys who do personal injury work who often do not charge for a consultation. So it's generally not that difficult to consult an attorney on that type of issue, simply because if you're correct in this liability, it's a substantial fee involved. So.
I just was going to cite the California example of the utility, where everybody thought the utility was responsible for the, what do they call it, a wildfire? Campfire. And then they did a report and they found out at least in the one set of campfires, they weren't responsible. So sometimes the chain of causation is kind of hard to lock it down, even though in our minds we think, oh, that's the reason, but proving it can be another thing.
We have a question in regards to housing. So if you were in assisted housing, housing like HUD, and your home was damaged by the hurricane, and you were told that either if your home was molded, flooded, and you were told in order to return, if you left in the state that it is in now, if you left, that you would have to reapply for housing there. But if you stayed during the repair and construction of your home, what are your rights as a tenant under that? Who is at law? Is that Section 8? Is that the landlord? So in other words, you and your family stay because you don't want to lose a home, but the people repairing your home have masks on, there's no insulation, there's mold and mildew as it's being repaired. But you don't want to leave because if you leave, you have to reapply, you know what that means.
So it's federally subsidized housing or public housing?
This is Section 8.
Section 8, private landlord.
Private landlord subsidized housing.
I hear your question. I'm not entirely clear on all the features of it because a voucher, Section 8 voucher, survives the end of a tenancy at any given residence, right?
Yes.
Right. Well, as long as the agency that issued the voucher is cool with it, is on board, approves your move, reissues you a new voucher. And actually, they should not be paying. Section 8 has these habitability standards that are federally prescribed, okay? And so they're not supposed to pay the owner their share if the place does not meet those standards for whatever reason. And so,
who do you contact if that is the case? If you stayed in your home because you were threatened that if you moved during the repairs that you would have to reapply, so you and your family stay during the repairs, and it's not up to code, who do you contact?
So when you say reapply, you mean find a new apartment?
Yeah, and pay a new deposit.
So basically, like, if you don't move out, you have to stay in this unlivable situation.
Exactly.
Or you can't come back. Is it a complex we're talking about?
Yes, it's an apartment complex.
I would go to the agency, I'd go to Wilmington Housing, whoever, and say,
This is a different county.
Different county, okay.
But it's a hurricane affected county.
There are apartment complexes that are Section 8, what's called project-based Section 8.
No, this is the private landlord.
Okay, it's a private.
Well, not private landlord. It's a complex, but it's not considered a
Was the house issued
trouble.
by a housing authority, or was the rent reduced because of the nature of the loan that the complex owner obtained from the federal government? So that's called project-based Section 8.
So, again, we're also back to that principle of you should get what you pay for. You can't unilaterally decide. But I would go, say the person needs to go back to the agency that issued the voucher, say, there's no way I'm going to pay for this if I have to stay there, and I'm not going to put my family at risk by living in an unsafe dwelling. You need to approve me to move. That's just a violation of the duty of the owner. I don't think the agency would approve that action. And if there were an eviction, a court eviction that took place, they would have to prove either non-payment of rent, violation of the lease, and the lease could not provide that you have to live in a dwelling that's unsafe. So I think there's some options there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's a very interesting question. It's a complex question. I hope that's helpful. I would hope the voucher issuing agency jumped on that. Really. So has this person called our number? Is this person, would they do that? Would you ask them to do that?
Yes.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you for asking that question.
Who else? Oh, there's a question.
Oh, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to respond to the lady in this room. Just to give a broader perspective about our state, North Carolina has about 58 to 60 floods a year. And so we're not the only ones in this room that are needing FEMA trailers and RVs. I mean, they're all over the mountains and stuff. And the Director of Emergency manager told me that they make these things right during the storm. Like they start making them and shipping them out. And then there's other people in the country that need them. And so they're divvying up these trailers and RVs for everybody, which is why we probably would get 224 of them divvied up to 10 counties. And then you're hoping to get people back in their homes and pull those to somewhere else. And so that's why the program, the STEP program, the Back at Home program is in place to get people back in their homes as quick as possible so that they can move these trailers other places. If you got damaged during Matthew, like me, I had water in my house from the flood, nothing, my roof was fine and everything. If you got money from FEMA, FEMA pays your flood insurance for 3 years. So next year's your last year. You should have a flood insurance certificate from the National Flood Insurance Program. If you didn't get a certificate, you have to go back, appeal to FEMA and say, hey, I got $100 from FEMA and I need a certificate. They'll issue you a certificate for your damages of water for Florence. So Florence comes and now I have 2 pine trees on my roof. Less water damage. So NFIP covered me for water. And now I'm in process of appeal with FEMA for the remainder, but they won't move forward on your house unless they know you got money from FEMA from Matthew or not, and you have contacted the NFIP to have an insurance adjuster come out. If you don't get money, like for me, if I don't get money from FEMA for my roof, which I don't want it, that's when you go to the last resort of a church or your long-term recovery group. And the sister over there, she's right, North Carolina Housing Finance, if you have a mortgage, you call them, they're a housing counseling agency. I have seen them literally help people pay it off through their hardship, I guess the qualifications of whatever they have left on their mortgage, and help them extend the life of their mortgage, go into a low interest and things of that nature. So the North Carolina Finance Housing Agency does still help for Hurricane Florence hardships.
I don't have a question, I have a comment, resource. So my name is Omari Wilson, and I'm a senior staff attorney at Land Loss Prevention Project in Durham, North Carolina. We are in we're located in Durham, downtown Durham. We cover all 100 counties. We do foreclosure defense. We help clients who can't afford to pay for legal assistance and they own real property. So we don't do landlord tenant law, but we do help people who have loaned their property on their homes and their land. So there's an issue that is touching on that. Be it foreclosure defense, we do estate planning, work with farmers. Then check us out. I don't have any information with me. I'm gonna be heading out in a little bit, but we don't have a Facebook page. We have a website. It's landloss.org, landloss.org, and we have a lot of resources on there. We have a publication. This is 8th edition called 10 Ways to Save Your Land, and it's got a lot of foundational information about deeds and estate planning and mineral rights and that kind of stuff. That's kind of a foundation for you to know. We also do bankruptcy too. Chapter 13 bankruptcy that was mentioned a little while ago. So it's just a resource I want people to know about it before I head out.
What's your website?
The website is landloss.org. It's landloss.org.
All right.
Thanks.
I have just one more question. From Hurricane Florence now, we have people working on houses, people getting houses worked on. Yeah, we have from Hurricane Matthew and Florence now, people have the house being worked on, Habitat for Home and private owners, but somehow the fund ran out in the middle of construction, so now they're left out unfinished home, and their promise to get their home fixed up, and now they're kind of like, you might got a wall here, you might not got a wall. You might be able to walk from the living room through the wall to the bedroom, and it's not fixed up. So what do they do?
Well, that's a little bit outside of the scope of what we're covering today, but are you saying that the contractor failed to perform?
They, what the understanding that they had was they were working on it, and then the money that was given to them, that was paid by the city or state, ran out, and they just stopped the project. The people unfinished homes fixed up.
Well, did they have a contract with the contractor?
The contract was with the city, but it wasn't with them. And they were just told that the people who had houses were told that the city would come by and fix the house up. They did assist damage and everything. Guess the insurance company and all that stuff, but the house will be fixed and never did.
Please have those persons call legal aid up under, put an application for legal assistance. They'll need to get by an attorney, so we know all the parameters.
I'm hoping my question can come out like I needed to, but if you have a rental property and it happens to be in a flood zone, it's been damaged several times, does the city have a right to limit how much you do to fix that house up?
It's a good question, but it's really beyond the scope of what we can present here today. We're generally not in the business of advising owners of rental property and do a lot of other considerations that come into play. I'm sorry to be non-responsive, but there's a limit to how much we know about the topic area. That's something you want to consult with your attorney about. There may be issues depending upon what the city is telling you.
I just want to. I just want to say, call the free service. That's all
Okay. As a reminder, this information is also in Riverview Terrace. These handouts, I don't know if are any of you going to be around for questioning after this?
I'll be around. We have copies of the handbooks. If you don't
Handbooks are here.
Here.
Information still Riverview Terrace. They'll still be around for tabling. You have more questions, they'll be there. You can get a few one-on-one minutes with them. Please make use of them while they're here. A lot of you procrastinated, didn't call, were bullied, were scared, felt as if you were at dead ends. You're here now to get some of your questions answered. Those that can't be answered, you can be sent in the right direction. We want to thank everyone for being on this panel today. Thank you for your time, for your brain. We appreciate you so much.
Before folks start leaving, we just want to say, we haven't said this yet, but when you leave here, if you haven't heard of our coalition before, we are a coalition of over 25 organizations that have organized to put this on. We call ourselves the Just Florence Coalition. So if you want to be a part of it, or you just want to stay connected with us, you can follow us on Facebook at Just Florence Coalition. Just Florence Recovery Coalition. Just Florence Recovery Coalition. And you want to find our website at justflorencerecovery.org. Thank you.
And also we have two quick announcements. One reminder, there are tables in Riverview Terrace with information and people there. Look on your program, you can see the